Hey guys, welcome back to our Porsche restoration project. In this video we're going to try and wrap up the remaining bits and pieces needed to sort of finish the front of the car, readying it for bigger parts and pieces like fenders, hood, bumpers, windshield, that sort of thing. But really we need to get through the small dribble and do some electrical troubleshooting just to make sure everything's going to work out before we start covering things up. You can see here in this box I've just got a few remaining small bits and pieces here. Go ahead and get these installed. These are going to install mostly on the outside of the fenders. Got a couple of hood struts in there. And then also you can see I have all the electrics hooked up here. Got turn signals, headlights, horns. All these are working now. Did have some issues going through the troubleshooting stage and was able to resolve that through this wiring diagram I acquired from Sierra Madre. So this is a real nice aftermarket wiring diagram, and they have these for most of the early cars and 356s. So if you're restoring one of these cars that has an original wiring harness, you think may have had some issues with it or somebody's tampered with it, this is going to be a real easy, surefire way to get you back to original settings and do your troubleshooting. You can see here also I printed out a page out of the manual trying to track some of these issues down. I just couldn't get it. It was just too small and not detailed enough to work out the problem. So first let's take a look at a couple of problems I had, how we got those resolved. And then we'll go ahead and do our electrical troubleshooting, take a look at the signals working, headlights, high beams, horns, and various electrics. So let's start with the left side front here. Let's take a look at our headlight wiring. So I've already done the troubleshooting on these and made sure everything works here before we do this video. A couple of previous videos I'm just basically hooking things up as I pulled it off the car and as I referenced old photographs. However, there were some issues with some of those wires. We'll go over those here in a second. So this is our left turn signal and driving light. Here's our wiring colors. This is exactly how it will need to be wired to work correctly on the left. Let's go ahead and take a look at the right side. Okay, and then here's our right side headlight. So this is going to be the position and colors of wires going into that configuration. And then our horn. Doesn't really matter whether you switch those brown and black wires. Either terminal will work on either side. And then also here's our right turn signal and driving light. So that will be the positions for those colors. And then this one loose wire here, this is going to be for a fog light. If you're so equipped, that's the color that will plug into your fog light. Okay, so first let's take a look at our horns here and find out what's going on with them that's different from left to right, also original to new replacement. So what you're seeing here up in the front here, this is the original horn that came off the car. This is from the left side, and this is a Bosch 400 Hertz. This car did not have the right side horn equipped with it when I found it, and they were hooked up how they were hooked up, which was incorrect. So basically when I put the car back together, I'm following incorrect wiring, which took many hours to track down and figure out what was corrupted and where. However, we were able to do it with our new wiring diagram. So here's our new replacement horn from Porsche, a real nice quality and real nice sounding horn. This is a 400 Hertz, and then also on the right hand side would be the 500 Hertz. And then I made these horn brackets to just kind of replicate the original horn brackets. And probably what I'll do, I'm just going to go ahead and use these horns for now because you can't drive the car without horns. And sometimes when you restore these cars, it takes many years to round up all the parts you need to get it 100% back to original condition or as complete as you want to get it. In the case of this horn, this one is working, needs to be restored, and but I need a mate for that. I need a 500 Hertz to match up with it. And also now I have to get a replacement original horn relay. Let's take a look at that and see what the problem was there. So here's a close-up look on our exploded wiring diagram of our wiring to our horn relay and also number positions for our wires. This worked perfect the first time right out of the chute. The wiring that came out of the car had been corrupted in this area, which is why the horn didn't work when I tried it when I originally got the car, and there was no way I would ever get it working, not in 100 years, without an accurate wiring diagram like this to find the problem. So what the problem was is somebody had cut off this lead here. So on your original wire, your red wire coming into the horn there is a heavy wire. It should have a pigtail red coming out of there, like a jumper lead. Somebody had cut that off of there, and there isn't any way I could ever get that horn to work with just one lead. So you're going to have to make sure you got two leads on there. I'm sure you probably will, but in my case, somebody had tampered with it for whatever reason and created quite a problem and many hours of tracking it down. Once we got it, I tried several different horn relays, wiring it 100 different ways. Nothing would work, but once I saw this, I immediately knew this was wrong because I did not have the jumper lead. So temporarily I'm using an aftermarket horn relay plugged into 87 and 86, just like this, 85 with our brown here, and then our horns 30 and 51 in those positions, and that works really good. Let's take a look at the horn relay that I'm using just to make sure that they work. And the horn relay that I pulled out of there, the original, really wasn't in that good of condition, so I'm going to replace that with an original at some point down the road. Okay, so we're back around to the dashboard side of the car. Got both switches pulled out there, and really how this works, so you got power coming up from the battery that goes into our light switch and then jumps from the light switch over to the ignition switch. Usually the way I've seen it is it comes from the battery into the ignition switch and then jumps from there to other circuits, but in the case of this car, that's how they worked it out at the factory. Everything here is working now. I've tried all the different positions. I've referred to this with my new wiring diagram. Everything seems to be correct. All these cars are going to be different, so depending on what you're working on, I wouldn't take this literally for it to be correct for your car, because there was some wiring in here that doesn't even belong in here. One of the wires that was in here that didn't belong in here was a yellow lead coming off the ignition for the radio, and that correct wire is going to be the red and white wire that'll be for your radio. But we'll have to hook that up later. I'll show you how to do that once we install the radio. And then you can see also I've got pulled off down below just to double check all my wiring on our relays down there. We got our headlight relay, and then we have our high beam relay, and then our emergency flasher relay, and everything is correctly pinned in position there and easy to follow. And also on that wiring diagram, very accurate to follow the numbering positions and colors of the wires. So we're correct here. And then on our right side rear here, I've got the rear tail light just mocked up in there, plugged in with the correct connections. And so here we're able to test our right turn signal, driving lights, and also brake lights. However, can't do the backup lights yet until we get our engine installed. And then our left side here, so I've got the rear tail ends off of this one. You can take a look inside, see what's going on while we're doing our troubleshooting. And then also I want to make a quickie video, I'm not sure when, but I will do a video on how to restore these tail lights and front corner lights a little bit down the road. Let's go ahead and get this camera set up on a tripod. We'll roll through some of the different functions and see how everything works. Alright, and then back in the cab here, let's just take a look at these switches on the steering column here. They're quite detailed on what they do to perform their functions, and everything's got to be working just right with everything else in order to make this work. Otherwise we're going to be blowing fuses. So right now I've already gone through the troubleshooting, and so I know it works. So let's just go ahead and see what the functions are. So with the ignition switch off and the key out, this left turn signal, if we turn it left, what that's going to do from a park position, it's going to give you a left park light, which is a driving light on your left side, front and rear. And then also same thing on the right side. I guess this was for parking back in the day, to keep those lights lit up overnight. At least that's the way it reads in the owner's manual. And then we have the high beams, which is forward. And then turn signals would be just basically left and right with the ignition on. Okay, and then over this side we have the windshield wiper motor switch. So if we pull the switch towards us with the ignition on, we should be able to have the windshield washer motor squirt fluid onto the windshield. From this position, up one is first speed, medium speed, and then high speed, and then back to off position. And then pull from any position. You could be in the middle of your speed and still pull it and get your windshield washer motor to squirt. That should be the correct way all those switches should work. Okay, so from accessory position on the ignition switch, which is far left, or ignition on, let's go ahead and test first our windshield wiper motor and squirters. So you can hear that's our fluid pump, and then speed 1, you can see everything working in there. Medium speed and high speed, and that's off. And then we go medium speed or high speed. Okay, so everything's working correct there. Next, let's go ahead and check our left park and right park. So our ignition switch is in the off position. Key is pulled out. And pull that down. That should be left. Alright, there's our left front. Hard to see in here with the glare, but that's definitely on. That's our left park. And our left park rear. Okay, now let's try our right park. Yeah, same thing with the glare there, but you can see that light is on inside there. And while that one's on, this one is definitely not on. And then the right rear park. Okay, now ignition is on. Let's go ahead and do a right turn signal. You can hear it clicking. Here's our turn signal relay. I've got that pulled apart just to make sure everything's working inside there. Our right side, right rear. Okay, and then turn the left signal on. Okay, next let's do our horns. And then let's do our headlights, low beam, high beam. And then just driving lights. And then emergency flasher. You can hear that ticking. And then let me set this up on the tripod, and then we'll show you the brake light. And then last, we'll go ahead and check our relay to our ignition back in the engine compartment. You won't be able to hear it, there's just too much background noise, but it is actuating. And then let's just take a look and see if we've got fuel pump activity. Okay guys, so I think we're far enough along here with our troubleshooting. We can go ahead and press on, get a few more bits and pieces on the car here. I'm feeling pretty confident now. We won't have to do any backtracking or uninstall some of the bigger components. Still got a couple issues to work out here. Got the interior cabin lights, got some kind of a grounding issue with one of the switches, And then also I've got a short circuit in the cigarette lighter. So hopefully I can track those down here pretty soon, and I'll let you know what I find out. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's get these horns installed and see what they look like. Okay, so let's first start with our driver's side here and see how that goes. What we're going to do, we're going to have to run our wiring through as it's coming out the body here. This is going to run down to all our connections. So one thing we have to do here is we have to take this end off our headlight, and how that works, these springs compress, and then that releases tension on those pins in there, and those just pull out. But first you got to compress the spring there, so we need to get that off of there so we can run it down this tube and out. So first let's go ahead and get that run through there. We'll get this staged, and then it'll make more sense what we're doing with our hold down bracket and fender support. Alright, so you can see how these pull out of here. So I'm going to compress this spring here and pull. There you go. Okay, and then once we get them out of there, really need to inspect them really good because that's really a tight 90-degree pinch there to hold those in. You can see this one here pretty beat up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to trim those off. Minimal amount off of there, strip them back, resolder them, and then once we pull them through the conduit, then we can reinstall a fresh new connection. It doesn't have any stress on the wires. That should give us a little bit better service. So before we pull our wiring through our tubing there, let's go ahead and trim off our headlight wires, peel them back, and resolder the ends. The whole trick with soldering, get a good solder connection, is using lots of flux and getting your soldering iron nice and hot. So I've got soldering flux on the end of our wire here. I've got flux on the end of our iron, and also I've got flux on the solder. Let's go ahead and see how that works. Just get it nice and hot. And then once it's on there, run it back and forth a little bit. That should be it. Alright, and then we'll just roll through all 6 connections there, and that's pretty much what it should look like. Okay, now we got those done, working on the ground. Let's go ahead and run these wires through the conduit. Alright, so we got our wires pulled through there, and so what we're going to do now, we need to slide in our conduit tube. So what we don't know at this point is how far into the body we're going to have to thread this, because that's going to come into play a little bit down the road. Bring the camera in here a little bit closer. That's going to come into play a little bit down the road. When we get our actual fender in place, what's going to happen is that distance is going to be set by the headlight bucket. So you got the transition conduit that's going to go on top here, which is going to go into our headlight bucket. So we need to remain adjustable here for now, and then also adjustable here. So probably what's going to happen temporarily, I'll just set this up, but we may have to roll this out of the way while we're installing our fender, and then roll it back in. Probably how that's going to work. Alright, let's take a look at our mock-up here and see how this works. So first thing we got here is our fender support clamp, and all this is just sitting here for now. Nothing's tight. I've got full movement side to side. I have adjustability in my horn direction. Also we can angle this up and down from here depending on where this is going to come out in relation to our horn grills. So we have a lot of angles we can adjust out for that, and that's pretty much how that works. And then so we'll tighten this down once we get our fender in proper location, and then our transition from our hard conduit to our flexible hose here. I got these hoses from Stoddard, real nice conduit hosing there, and then new clamps from Porsche. These were pretty much shot when I pulled them off the car. And then clamp direction or screw direction on the clamps will be towards the tire. That way you can access them when you're putting the fender on. And then a close-up look at our finished product. So this is our passenger side, and you can see here we've got full adjustability. Once we get our fender in place, we'll know where to tighten everything down. Real ingenious system they had here for doing this. And then also, even though I've got my wires plugged in there, that's just basically holding them in place while I'm working with the car. But this is going to have to come up through the headlight bucket and then back down through the bucket in order to plug into our horns and turn signal. And then our driver's side. Real cool setup. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the fuel filler spout. I've got that kind of mocked up in here, and the antenna. Got those staged. Let's go ahead and see how that puts together, and we'll get those installed. So first thing we want to do on this one, we just want to go ahead and press in our fender seal into the body here, and then also the drain tubing that pops in from the inside and then runs down and clamps to the body and out. That's how that works. And then once our seal is in location, we can go ahead and grease up our fuel filler tube there. A little red rubber grease helps slide that through there. And then I'm pulling out the foam seal from this side just so we don't get grease all over it. Let me go ahead and wiggle that through there, get it in location. We'll clean the grease off and stand back, take a look at it. Okay, and then our finished look here for our gas filler neck and seal. Nice seal from Porsche, exact fit. And you can see how it clamps down as it comes down the body and out for our overflow. And then also our antenna. So this is just sitting in place for now. We're going to have to adjust this up and down for our final height adjustment and distance adjustment once we get our fender in place. And then that wire will come over there and in through the jamb. And then our fuel filler from this side. And everything all cleaned up now, coming through our sponge seal. And finishing off here when we put our gas tank in a little bit down the road. And then one final thing we want to do here before we wrap this video up, I want to go ahead and put our hood struts in place. Go ahead and pin them at the bottom. And even though I don't have the labels on here, I've peeled those off of there. These were labeled left and right during the bodywork stage. You could see in one of my early mock-up videos, it's kind of important to label these left and right because they might have different resistance and how that hood adjusts out. We want to make sure it goes in exactly as it worked. And then the last detail I want to go over here today before we close up is going to be this hood seal. So there's a replacement seal from Porsche, real exact fit, like most everything they make. And so what's happening here, I've got no glue in the cowl at all. I've got that pressed in there with some plastic tooling, and all I can do to squeeze it in there is not going to come out. So if you use glue in there, you can really get yourself into trouble if you have to move it or jockey it around. However, when you come down the sides here, we're going to need to peel this back. You can see the profiles there. We'll need to contact cement this as it comes down the body. But we'll go over that on the next video. We're going to be rolling into the interior. We finished up the roof liner, and also we're starting some Dynamat and some sound deadening in there. That should be real fun to go over that. So this is going to do it for now for the front of the car. I think we're far enough along where we can start bringing bigger pieces into the car and not have to worry about doing any kind of backtracking. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.